How Hitler rose to power step by step. From obscure soldier to dictator of Germany, Adolf Hitler did not seize control of Germany overnight. His rise was a slow process shaped by war, economic crisis, clever propaganda, and the mistakes of political opponents. Understanding this path is essential to understanding how a democratic nation could turn into one of history's most brutal dictatorships. 1. The aftermath of World War I, a nation in crisis, 1918 to 1919. Germany emerged from World War I defeated, humiliated, and economically shattered. The Treaty of Versailles forced Germany to accept blame for the war, surrender territory, limit its army, and pay enormous reparations. Many Germans felt betrayed by their leaders and believed the army had been stabbed in the back by politicians, Jews, and communists. Hitler, an unemployed former soldier, found purpose in this atmosphere of anger. In 1919, he joined a tiny political group in Munich called the German Workers' Party, DAP. The party preached extreme nationalism, anti-communism, and anti-Semitism, ideas that matched Hitler's own resentments. 2. Discovering the power of speech, 1919 to 1921. Hitler's greatest weapon was his voice. He proved to be an electrifying public speaker who could channel the frustrations of ordinary Germans. Crowds grew rapidly, and the party renamed itself the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP, or Nazi Party. By 1921, Hitler had become party leader. He created symbols, the swastika flag, the Heil salute, and formed a paramilitary wing, the SA, stormtroopers, to intimidate opponents and protect Nazi meetings. The movement was still small, but it now had identity, discipline, and a charismatic figurehead. 3. The failed beer hall putsch, 1923. Inspired by Mussolini's March on Rome, Hitler attempted to overthrow the Bavarian government in November 1923. The coup, known as the beer hall putsch, collapsed after a brief gun battle with police. Hitler was arrested and charged with treason. The failure became an unexpected opportunity. His trial turned into a national stage where he portrayed himself as a patriotic hero. Sentenced to a mild prison term, he wrote Mein Kampf, outlining his ideology: racial purity, hatred of Jews, destruction of communism, and expansion of German territory. 4. A new strategy, winning power legally, 1924 to 1929. After release from prison, Hitler concluded that power must be taken through elections, not revolution. The Nazi Party reorganized, built local branches, and used modern propaganda techniques, posters, rallies, and newspapers. During the mid-1920s, Germany experienced economic stability under the Weimar Republic, and Nazi support remained limited. In the 1928 elections, they won only 2.6% of the vote. Hitler seemed like a marginal extremist until disaster struck. 5. The Great Depression, Hitler's breakthrough, 1929 to 1932. The global economic crash destroyed Germany's fragile recovery. By 1932, more than 6 million Germans were unemployed. Faith in democratic parties collapsed. Hitler promised simple solutions: jobs through massive public works, rejection of Versailles. A strong, proud Germany scapegoats, especially Jews and communists. Nazi votes exploded from 800,000 to over 13 million in 1932, making them the largest party in parliament. Street violence between Nazis and communists convinced many middle-class Germans that only Hitler could restore order. 6. Backroom deals make Hitler chancellor, January 1933. President Paul von Hindenburg and conservative elites disliked Hitler, but believed they could control him. They persuaded Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as chancellor on the 30th of January 1933, expecting the Nazis to be tamed by coalition partners. It was a fatal miscalculation. 7. The Reichstag fire and emergency powers, February 1933. 1 month later, the German parliament building, the Reichstag, burned down. Hitler blamed communists and convinced Hindenburg to sign the Reichstag fire decree, suspending civil liberties. Freedom of speech ended, political opponents arrested, newspapers, censored, police given unlimited powers. Democracy effectively died within weeks. 8. The Enabling Act, Legal Dictatorship, March 1933. Hitler pushed through the Enabling Act, allowing his cabinet to make laws without parliament. Intimidated deputies voted under the eyes of armed SA men. From this moment, Hitler ruled legally as a dictator. Other parties were banned, trade unions destroyed, and regional governments taken over by Nazi governors. Germany became a one-party state. 9. Eliminating rivals. The Night of the Long Knives, 1934. To secure the loyalty of the army and big business, Hitler purged the SA leadership, including his old ally Ernst Röhm, during the Night of the Long Knives. Hundreds were murdered without trial. The message was clear. Hitler's word was above the law. 10th Führer of Germany, August 1934. When President Hindenburg died, Hitler merged the offices of President and Chancellor, declaring himself Führer. The army swore a personal oath to him, not to Germany. Through propaganda, terror, and economic recovery programs like the Autobahn and rearmament, Hitler won genuine popularity. By 1936, he was absolute master of Germany, only 3 years after becoming Chancellor. Why did Hitler succeed? Key factors: economic despair, unemployment and poverty made extreme promises attractive, weak democracy, the Weimar system was divided and unstable, propaganda genius, Hitler simplified complex problems into emotional slogans, use of violence, the SA and SS intimidated opponents, elite misjudgment, conservatives thought they could control him, scapegoating, Jews and minorities were blamed for national problems, from chancellor to total dictator, 1934 to 1939. By 1934, Hitler had eliminated most political opposition, but Germany was not yet the fully controlled Nazi state remembered today. The next 5 years were spent reshaping society, crushing independent institutions, and preparing the nation for conquest. 11. Creating the Nazi police state. Hitler understood that fear must accompany propaganda. He expanded 2 key organizations. The SS, Schutzstaffel, under Heinrich Himmler, became an elite force loyal only to Hitler. The Gestapo's secret police hunted political opponents, Jews, clergy, and anyone who criticized the regime. Concentration camps such as Dachau were originally built for political prisoners, not yet for mass extermination. Thousands of communists, social democrats, journalists, and priests disappeared without trial. Ordinary Germans quickly learned that one careless sentence could destroy a family. 12. Propaganda and the cult of the Führer. Control of minds was as important as control of streets. Joseph Goebbels, minister of propaganda, used every modern tool. Radio broadcasts in almost every home, massive rallies at Nuremberg films, by Leni Riefenstahl, glorifying Hitler textbooks, rewritten to teach Nazi racial theory. Hitler was presented as Germany's savior, almost a religious figure. Children joined the Hitler Youth, where loyalty to the Führer replaced loyalty to parents or church. 13. Crushing independent institutions. No organization was allowed to remain neutral. Trade unions were abolished and replaced by the Nazi Labor Front. Judges were told to follow the will of the Führer instead of the law. Churches were pressured. Many pastors who resisted were arrested. This process, called Gleichschaltung, coordination, forced every part of society to line up with Nazi ideology, from sports clubs to universities. 14. Economic recovery through rearmament. Hitler gained real popularity by reducing unemployment, but the recovery was built mainly on massive military spending, building highways, Autobahn, reintroducing conscription in 1935. These policies violated the Treaty of Versailles, yet created millions of jobs. Germans felt proud again, not realizing the economy was being turned into a machine for war. 15. The racial state begins. Anti-Semitism moved from speeches into law. The Nuremberg Laws, 1935, Jews lost German citizenship. Marriages between Jews and Aryans were banned. Jews were pushed out of professions, schools, and public life. Step by step, neighbors were turned into outcasts. Many Germans accepted this discrimination because propaganda portrayed Jews as enemies responsible for past suffering. 16. Testing the world's reaction, Hitler carefully challenged Europe to see how far he could go. 1935, rearmament announced. Britain and France protested, but did nothing. 1936, remilitarization of the Rhineland. German troops entered a zone that was supposed to be demilitarized. Hitler later admitted he would have retreated if France had resisted. 1936 to 39, Spanish Civil War. Germany tested new weapons and tactics while Europe looked away. Each success convinced Hitler that the democracies were weak. 17. The turning point, Kristallnacht, 1938. On 9 to 10 November 1938, Nazi mobs, directed by the regime, attacked Jewish homes, synagogues, and shops. This event, Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, marked a shift from discrimination to open, organized violence. 30,000 Jewish men sent to camps. Thousands of businesses destroyed, Jews forced to pay a fine for the damage done to them. The world protested, but again there was no serious intervention. 18. Expanding the Reich. Without war, Hitler used threats and diplomacy to enlarge Germany. 1938. Anschluss with Austria. German troops entered to cheering crowds. 1938. Munich Agreement. Britain and France allowed Hitler to take the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia, believing it would bring peace for our time. Instead, Hitler occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia in 1939. It proved his goal was not fairness, but domination. 19. Preparing the final step. By 1939, Germany was a dictatorship with a powerful modern army, a population shaped by propaganda, opponents imprisoned or silent, Jews and minorities isolated and defenseless. Hitler signed a shocking deal with Stalin, how he kept control. During World War II, 1939 to 1943. Once war began, Hitler was no longer just a political dictator. He became the supreme warlord of Germany. His ability to hold power depended on early victories, terror at home, and the belief that he was a military genius. 21. Early victories created a myth of infallibility. Between 1939 and 1941, Germany achieved a series of stunning successes. Poland defeated in weeks, France collapsed in 1940, Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Belgium overrun. The Balkans conquered in 1941. These triumphs convinced millions that Hitler could not be wrong. Generals who doubted him were ignored, and ordinary Germans trusted his intuition more than professional military advice. The Führer myth reached its peak. 22. Total war at home. To keep society obedient, the regime tightened control. Food and clothing were rationed. Letters were censored. Listening to foreign radio could mean prison. The Gestapo encouraged neighbors to inform on each other. At the same time, propaganda promised that sacrifices would lead to a glorious new German empire. Fear and hope worked together to maintain loyalty. 23. The war becomes ideological. Invasion of the USSR. In June 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. This was not just a military campaign, but a racial war meant to destroy Jewish Bolshevism. Orders allowed mass shootings of Jews and communists, starvation of Soviet prisoners, destruction of entire villages. The Holocaust expanded behind the front lines as mobile killing units. The Einsatzgruppen murdered over 1 million people. Hitler's power was now tied to crimes so vast that retreat became impossible. 24. The final solution. By 1942, the regime decided on industrialized genocide. Death camps such as Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor were built in occupied Poland. Trains carried Jews from all over Europe to gas chambers. Hitler rarely signed written orders, but his speeches and private conversations made the goal clear. The SS competed to fulfill what they believed was his wish. Terror abroad reinforced terror at home. Any German who opposed the regime risked being labeled a traitor to the racial struggle. 25. Hitler takes direct military command. After setbacks near Moscow in 1941, Hitler dismissed experienced generals and appointed himself commander-in-chief of the army. Decisions were increasingly based on ideology and stubborn will rather than strategy. He forbade retreats, leading to disasters such as the encirclement at Stalingrad, the defeat in North Africa, huge losses of aircraft and tanks. Yet propaganda hid the scale of defeat, and many Germans still believed victory was possible. 26. The resistance that failed. Not all Germans were loyal. Students of the White Rose, church leaders like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and conservative officers plotted against Hitler. The most famous attempt was the 20th of July 1944 bomb plot, led by Klaus von Stauffenberg. The failure allowed Hitler to unleash brutal revenge. Thousands executed, families arrested. The army placed under tighter Nazi control, fear deepened, and organized opposition inside Germany was effectively destroyed. 27. A society trapped by its own crimes. As news of mass murder spread, many Germans felt they could not turn back. They feared Allied punishment and Soviet revenge. Hitler exploited this anxiety, presenting himself as the only shield against annihilation. Power was now maintained by terror of the SS, dependence on wartime rations and jobs, bombing that made people cling to any authority promising protection, propaganda portraying the war as a fight for survival. 28. The beginning of the end, 1943. Defeats at Stalingrad and Kursk, followed by Allied landings in Italy, shattered the dream of victory. Still, Hitler refused negotiations. He believed fate had chosen him and that surrender would destroy Germany. The regime prepared for a war to the last German, arming teenagers and old men, executing anyone who spoke of peace. The fall of the dictator, 1944 to 1945. By 1944, the empire Hitler had built was crumbling on every front, yet his control over Germany remained iron-tight, and he dragged the nation into a final catastrophe rather than accept defeat. 29. D-Day, the beginning of the end. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces landed in Normandy. Hitler believed the invasion was only a diversion and kept vital tank divisions away from the beaches. His refusal to allow flexible defense helped the Allies break out of France. Within months, Paris was liberated, Germany lost access to French industry, Allied bombers could strike German cities at will. The myth of Hitler as military genius was shattered among many generals, though few dared say so openly. 30. Germany under the bombs. Allied air campaigns turned urban life into hell. Hamburg, Dresden, Cologne, and Berlin were devastated. Millions became homeless. Instead of protecting civilians, Hitler ordered factories to keep producing at all costs, executions for defeatist talk, use of foreign slave labor to replace dead workers. Suffering often strengthened desperation rather than rebellion, binding people closer to the regime that claimed only it could defend them. 31. The Ardennes Gamble. In December 1944, Hitler launched a surprise counterattack in the West, the Battle of the Bulge. It was a last throw of the dice meant to split the Allies. The plan failed, wasting Germany's final reserves of fuel and trained soldiers. After this defeat, even loyal officers knew the war was lost, but Hitler still rejected any talk of surrender. 32. The Eastern Front collapses. While the Western Allies advanced, the Red Army smashed through Poland and reached the borders of Germany. Reports of Soviet revenge, massacres, and rapes spread terror among civilians. Hitler used this fear to demand fanatical resistance. Towns were declared fortresses to be defended to the last man, turning Germany itself into a battlefield. 33. Child soldiers in total desperation. By 1945, the regime armed. The Volkssturm, old men and teenagers. Hitler youth units sent against tanks, police, and clerks forced into uniform. These measures showed how completely Hitler valued ideology over human life. The state he created was willing to sacrifice an entire generation rather than admit failure. 34. The last days in Berlin. In April 1945, Soviet troops surrounded the capital. Hitler hid in the Führer bunker, issuing imaginary orders to armies that no longer existed. Even then, he commanded destruction of German infrastructure, so it would not fall to the enemy. Execution of officers seeking negotiations, continued persecution and murder of remaining Jews. Reality had no power over his will. 35. Suicide and collapse. On 30 April 1945, Hitler married Eva Braun and then killed himself. His chosen successor, Admiral Dönitz, surrendered unconditionally on 8 May 1945. The Third Reich, promised to last 1,000 years, had survived only 12. 36. Immediate consequences. Hitler's fall left behind around 60 to 70 million dead worldwide. Germany in ruins and divided. The Holocaust exposed to the world. Millions of refugees wandering Europe. The dictatorship ended, but its scars shaped generations. Final understanding how power was gained and lost. Hitler rose because crisis destroyed faith in democracy. Propaganda offered simple answers. Elites believed they could use him. Step-by-step laws killed freedom. Fear silenced opposition. He fell because his ideology ignored reality. He rejected compromise. The world eventually united against him. A system built on hate consumed itself after the fall, destroying Hitler's system, 1945 to 1949. Hitler's suicide ended his personal rule, but Nazism did not disappear overnight. Millions had served the regime, believed its propaganda, or benefited from its crimes. The Allies faced a huge question: how do you rebuild a nation that has been ruled by hatred? 37. Germany without a Führer. When surrender came in May 1945, Germany was a landscape of ruins. Major cities were 40 to 60% destroyed. Transportation and electricity barely functioned. Food shortages threatened starvation. Over 10 million displaced people wandered Europe. The Nazi Party was banned immediately, but its members were everywhere: teachers, police, judges, doctors. Removing them without collapsing society was nearly impossible. 38. The Nuremberg Trials, law against tyranny. For the first time in history, leaders of a state were tried for crimes against humanity. Hermann Göring, Rudolf Hess, and other top Nazis faced an international court. The Holocaust was documented with overwhelming evidence. Just following orders was rejected as a defense. 12 defendants were sentenced to death, others to prison. More important than punishment was the message. Aggressive war and genocide were now crimes under international law. 39. Denazification. A difficult cleansing. The Allies tried to remove Nazi influence from daily life. Party members were screened and classified. Nazi symbols and books were banned. Schools received new textbooks. Former concentration camps were shown to German civilians. Yet Cold War tensions soon shifted priorities. Experienced administrators were needed to rebuild West Germany, and many ex-Nazis quietly returned to normal careers. True moral reckoning would take decades. 40. Re-educating a nation. Democracy had to be learned again. New political parties were encouraged. Independent newspapers reopened. Local elections returned in 1946. The 1949 Basic Law created the Federal Republic of Germany, designed to prevent another dictatorship. Powers were divided, human rights guaranteed, and extremist parties restricted. Direct lessons from Hitler's rise. 41. Facing the Holocaust, survivors demanded recognition and justice. Testimonies from camps shocked the world. Israel was created in 1948 as a homeland for Jewish refugees. Memorials and museums slowly appeared across Germany. For many Germans, the truth was painful. Some denied it, others felt collective guilt.